The more busy you are, the more successful you are. But there's so much to be said for slowing down and the monotasking. I had never heard that word until the program. It really hit home. The opportunities to practice mindfulness in the program really enforced it for me.
Nurses and nurse coaches, welcome back to the Nurse Coach Collective podcast. I'm your host, Heather. Today, I've got an awesome guest for you. Laura Alessio, coming to us live from Puerto Rico, is a board-certified health and wellness nurse coach. Her practice revolves around helping people to manage stress through simple mindfulness practices so they can feel more balanced and at ease in their everyday lives. Her passion is guiding others to slow down, to listen to themselves, and create a life that feels peaceful, healthy, and truly fulfilling. And doesn't that sound good? Laura, welcome. I'm super excited to get to have you here today.
Thank you so much, Heather. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Okay, so you have all kinds of letters after your name. RN, MSN, PHN. Talk to me a little bit about your nursing journey before becoming a nurse coach.
I did an accelerated master's program in nursing. I had studied sociology and Spanish as an undergrad. And just side story, my mom was in a catastrophic car accident when she was 10 weeks pregnant with me and suffered a traumatic brain injury. And subconsciously, I always kind of had that caregiver. I feel like that's ultimately what led me into nursing, because I realized, throughout my life being there and helping. I mean, she's independent, but extra patience and, a lot of things that I realized I gained these qualities growing up in, with that type of childhood. So I actually, after studying sociology and Spanish, my undergrad, that's when I started thinking about healthcare. I actually considered becoming a pediatrician when I was really young. I remember that was my dream. And then, as we go through life and our paths change and dreams and desires. And that's when I really started thinking about nursing after graduating from my undergrad program. I did apply to be a community health educator in the Peace Corps, and I went to Nicaragua and did that. And then when I returned, I did more volunteer work in the hospital just to, confirm this was the next path that I wanted to take. So I did an accelerated master's entry program in nursing. So it was for people who had their career or their undergrad degree in something other than nursing, or they wanted to change careers. And so I did the volunteer work in a few different units in the hospital. And then during nursing school, I worked as an emergency medical technician in the ER, which gave me a lot of great, hands-on experience. And I'm a very visual learner. So to be able to learn what see what I was learning in school in my work was really, really helpful. And then I transitioned into a similar role at Children's Hospital as a patient care assistant. Then actually, upon graduation, I kind of went back to that. I really loved the community, the nursing, I forget the exact name of, community and nursing semester in school, and that public health experience. And, it reminded me a lot of what I did in the Peace Corps. And so I ended up actually working as a public health nurse for the County of San Diego. That's what the PHN is. And it just holds a near and dear place to my heart, especially now that I'm in Puerto Rico, and I can see where that can be very, useful, that experience and skills that I gained. And then I transitioned into a colleague of mine from nursing school. She actually went straight into case management, doing work comp case management. So helping be an advocate for injured workers to get them the care and treatment that they need to be able to get back into the workplace. And she and I had stayed in contact, and she let me know there was an opening for one of the companies, that worked kind of similar to the role she was doing in her company. And so that's where I made that transition and pivoted. And then that's kind of what led me to ultimately go into legal nurse consulting. My dad was a personal injury attorney, and I never had any desire to be an attorney, but I always liked hearing his cases. And I remember seeing a book in nursing school on legal nurse consulting, and it just kind of piqued my interest, but we didn't really learn too much about it. And so then with all the downtime during the pandemic, I thought that could be a good opportunity to take the course just to learn about it, never really having a plan to start my own business. And then after I completed the course, I think it was within a few months, I was at a luncheon with some colleagues, and one of them said, "Oh, I could send you a referral. Like, how would we pay you?" And I just was like, "I don't know. I hadn't thought about it yet." And then she just made it sound so easy. She was just like, "Start an LLC." And I was like, "Okay." And so that's kind of how it happened, like baptism by fire. And it's so interesting just how our lives take us in different directions. And I started that business in 2021, and then it was in, I think, 2023 when I learned about nurse coaching. I was actually at a med legal conference for doctors and attorneys, but there was a vendor there who was doing video interviews of the attendees, and he started telling me that his wife is a nurse who teaches nurses how to be nurse coaches, and like had this light bulb moment, like, what is this? Tell me everything. And immediately went down all these rabbit holes. I got to meet her that afternoon. She came by to visit with their son, and ever since then, I felt like I almost immediately knew. Well, I immediately had this thought, like, where has this been? How come I haven't heard about this? And like for my own personal health journey, being diagnosed with Hashimoto's in 2017, I would have definitely hired a nurse coach if I knew they existed. That was, ever like the turning point of, this is the direction this is like the dream career I didn't know existed.
Like so many of us have that feeling when we first discover nurse coaching, right? Like, what is this? Why have I never heard of it? Oh my gosh, this is the dream career that I never knew existed. This is so cool, hearing all of these missing pieces of your story, Laura. Peter and I actually talk about you a lot. We share with other nurse coaches who have this desire to travel and go live somewhere different. A lot of people get into nurse coaching for that freedom side of things, the flexibility. And what does that mean for many of us? It's like envisioning the palm trees on the beach and having your own practice. And is that possible? We talk about you a lot, but I didn't know all of these pieces that led up to you even discovering nurse coaching in the first place. And what I'm learning is that you and I actually have a lot in common, because my initial college education, my first degree, started in psychology and the mental health side of things. I also took off to South America, where I lived for 3 years, mainly in Chile and the surrounding countries, where I did volunteer work. I got my hands on every aspect of healthcare that I could get exposure to. And then when I came back, I jumped into an accelerated nursing program. So we've got a lot in common, which is really cool to be discovering right now.
Yes.
So, question for you: when you were at that point where you're at this conference, you learn about nurse coaching. You said it was like, okay, immediately you knew this is it. So, what was that feeling? Was there something about nurse coaching that really caught your attention and your heart, or was there something in your current nursing practice that you were like, this is not working and I'm looking for something different? Like, what was that kind of catalyst and light that went off for you?
The light bulb moment was instantly like me thinking back to, like I mentioned, my Hashimoto's diagnosis and that journey. But also I had done a yoga teacher training in 2019. And that was something that I practiced yoga for a really long time. And I never really had a intention, just like with my business, like start a business. I didn't have the intention to be a yoga teacher, but I just wanted to learn more because I had been practicing it for so long. And so within that training, I also learned a portion about Ayurvedic medicine and meditation and mindfulness. And so, upon completing that, I had this desire and passion to bring this into nursing and combine it into what I was doing with nursing, but I didn't know how to do it or where to start. I didn't even know there was such a thing as becoming a board certified holistic nurse. Like, I think I remember doing some Google search, like unfound AHNA, but I didn't know that it was really a possibility, I guess. So that was what really, those were the two main things that were like, oh, wow, like this is possible. So I didn't really I know a lot of people kind of, question, like, is this a scam or is this a thing? And I didn't really have that. What I was doing at the time in my professional life as a legal nurse consultant, I did really enjoy it. And I loved having, like we talked about, the flexibility and the freedom. Although with that work, you don't have like 100% flexibility, because what I was doing was a lot of in-person defense medical exams, did do case management telephonically, and I still do some of that. I still do some of the legal nurse consulting. But the nurse coaching just made it seem like I would have even more flexibility. And I mean, to be perfectly honest, working with attorneys can be challenging sometimes, and I'll just leave it at that. And so the nurse coaching,
Understood.
it feels like, my passion and my purpose and my love. And I don't feel like I'm working when I'm doing this. It's just like, kind of that pinch me. I like it. It's, I like, why didn't I know about this earlier? But then at the same time, I look back and reflect, like, it's just so interesting how life unravels and the timing of everything. And I'm just so grateful that I did find it.
Yeah. And we find things when we're ready, right? I think about that a lot. Like if I had discovered nurse coaching fresh out of nursing school or in my first year as an ICU nurse, I probably would have been very closed-minded to it because I had my pathway all laid out for me in the trajectory of my mind. I was going to become the most badass ICU nurse I could be. I was going to go see CRN. I was going to maybe go back to school for nurse practitioner, right? Like I had this thing that probably my journey wouldn't have been able to be interrupted. My mind wasn't open to that until I got to that certain point. And then I, like you, discovered it, had the light bulb, was like, what is this? And you mentioned something really interesting, Laura, which is that a lot of nurses hear about this and they start asking those questions like, is this a real thing or is this a scam? And understandable. I think everybody should be slightly skeptical of just about everything they discover through the internet or Facebook ads these days, right? Like we got to protect ourselves. And yet there's also a side of that that's, kind of sad that when a nurse discovers a side of healthcare and healing that feels hopeful and inspiring and like, oh, this is getting me to the root of why I became a nurse in the first place, but that sometimes our first thoughts and questions are those of doubt or wondering if this is real or wondering if it's too good to be true. So I really do appreciate you sharing your story and being willing to put words to it. Like it feels like a pinch me moment. It feels like, hey, this is the actual life that I get to live. And it doesn't feel like work because I get to love what I do. So let's talk about that side of things. What do you actually do? What does your now practice in Puerto Rico as a nurse coach look like? I know you live and breathe mindfulness has been super important for your growth and I think for what you bring to your clients. Talk to me about your practice.
I just really during the Nurse Coach Collective program loved the mindfulness portion of it. And, I had like, when I first started doing yoga, it was restorative yoga. And I was like totally bored, to be perfectly honest, because I was so used to like high intensity workouts. I was training for a triathlon at the time. And my friend suggested this yoga class on our rest day. And I was so bored. But then the more I did it, the more I realized how important it is. And like, I feel like it's almost more important than, the high intensity because we don't have enough of that in our society, in our world to really slow down. And like, in the program, the slow down to speed up and the monotasking, like I had never heard that word until the program. And so it really just hit home for me because it reminded me of, the experiences that I had with the restorative yoga and then getting into meditation and I really struggled. Right. I mean, now it's like my love and passion. And in the beginning, meditation was really hard for me because it was, that monkey mind. And like, I didn't understand when people would say like, oh, I meditate before going to bed. Like in my mind, I just was like, if you're tired, why wouldn't you just go to bed? Like, why meditate? But now that I've been practicing it for so long and I feel like the opportunities to practice mindfulness in the program really enforced it for me. And so I've become, so in love with it that I've created the Stress Less with Mindfulness community in Facebook, which I love. And it's just really special place to be able to share with everyone and kind of just like a reminder for people because it's so easy for us to go, throughout our day and like society expects us to, it's like the more the more busy you are, the more successful you are. But there's so much to be said for slowing down. And I've felt and learned even more of that since moving to Puerto Rico. And so, yeah, as far as my coaching services, I offer one-on-one and I also am really excited to have been recently certified as a facilitator for a Back to Balance series that Dr. Joe Dispenza had created. So I'm incorporating that now into my coaching services, which has been really amazing opportunity and just beautiful to be able to work with my clients and provide that offering. So it's a gift that I give them when when they sign up for my coaching. One of my packages, I have a 4-session and a 9-session package, and that's a gift if they're interested. Of course, I still am. I feel like newer nurse coach, but my niche and specialty is in the direction of mindfulness meditation. So it's up to the client if that's something they want to incorporate or not, or depending on what they're coming to me for. Like I have some clients who want really just to specifically work on their nutrition or weight loss or mindfulness and meditation. So it depends on what their interests are, but I really just have come to love the mindfulness and just my own experience with meditation and the personal and professional transformation that I've witnessed and been able to experience in this lifetime. I'm so grateful.
So you said before, it's interesting, like I didn't have the intention to become a yoga teacher. I didn't have the intention to start a business, right? But then here I am and these things unfold. I think mindfulness is so interesting because sometimes our clients come into nurse coaching knowing that that's a part of how we might be able to support them, right? With slowing down, with becoming more present. And so that's something that they are open to and wanting. But a lot of times our clients come into nurse coaching, they have never practiced mindfulness. They either are closed to it as a practice or they just simply don't know what it is because they've never experienced it. So it's like, I didn't have the intention of learning to become more mindful, but then through working with a nurse coach, that is often one of the biggest takeaways and insights that we hear when we receive client testimonials. It's like, oh my goodness, I have learned to slow down. I have learned to de-stress. I have learned to be present. And then how that trickles into every area of life, from work to family to overall well-being. So I love that you have found that specific component that is not only been a powerful part of your journey, but now you're finding ways to bring it to others.
Yeah, anyway, I love how you did the mindfulness practice just with us here today, this morning. It's just a way to clear, and it can be. I feel like so many people in society think it has to look this certain specific way, with your legs crossed and you're in this position, and it doesn't. It can be like, walking on the beach or wherever you are. Like that's one of my favorite parts of the work that Dr. Joe Dispenza does. He has these walking meditations, and those are so powerful.
What Laura is referring to here is before we press the record button on today's episode, I invited her to join me in slowing down for 2 simple deep breaths of just closing our eyes and breathing in through our nose and out through our mouth. That's actually a practice that I do before every single podcast episode, because without it, who knows how I'm going to show up or what I'm going to be thinking about. My mind sometimes is running a million miles a minute. And yeah, for me, sometimes mindfulness is just that simple, deep breath. How would you, Laura, define mindfulness for somebody who doesn't know what it is? Dispenza, clearly, and I love Dispenza, has helped shape your idea of what it is and how it can be practiced. If you're describing it to a client, for example, like maybe you say, hey, are you open to this type of mindfulness practice? They're like, I don't know, I have no idea what it is. How would you break it down in simple terms for them to understand?
I just want to say it is important to note, there is a difference between mindfulness and meditation, and I don't have to go down that route. But as far as the mindfulness itself, I would say it's a way, an opportunity to be observant of the present moment and to be fully aware of how your body's feeling and maybe the energy that's surrounding your body, maybe reflecting on, your mind. And it's a way to come back to the present moment and really being conscious of where you are and what you're doing and what's going on in that moment. And I think it's important to say that, yes, I love to have these mindfulness sessions with clients, and I offer them free in my Stress Less with Mindfulness group. And I think it's important to also recognize that it can be done at any time and any place and anywhere. It's really just that, catching yourself, like, oh, gotta go do this, checking out things on to do this. Just taking a second, a moment, a minute, however long you have to just pause and breathe. And that's what I really emphasize when I do the guided sessions, because there is so much going on in our world, and pausing to focus on our breath and think about, how powerful it is. And it's so easy to take for granted. We wake up and we, go start our day, but really taking just the time to stop for a moment and think about our breath and how powerful it is, and how our body can change, our sympathetic, parasympathetic, autonomic nervous system, how it can change from, the beginning of not even a minute, just one breath to, one inhale, one exhale, and how much that can change the nervous system.
And full transparency, like, even though you're describing it in such simple terms, right? It doesn't have to be this very complicated thing. It doesn't have to be what we often envision of, right? Sitting there in the perfect setting, eyes closed, legs crossed, you've got the perfect little Buddha pose, right? It can be finding that moment to take one slow, deep breath. But full transparency, mindfulness is probably the aspect of my own self-care routine that I struggle to maintain the most. I don't know why. It always has been, no matter how long I have done this work, no matter how long I have supported clients to improve their well-being. Eating healthy comes super easy for me. Getting outside and moving my body is like that necessity that it's easy for me not to neglect. But something about the mindfulness is really challenging, especially when I equate it with needing to, carve out that 10, 15, 20-minute session to go sit in that quietude. So one thing that is helpful for me is doing exactly what you said, finding those quiet moments instead of that chunk of time, right? Just one breath, just that one routine I have every day. Like if I'm going to get into the shower every evening, I'm going to start it with those 3 deep breaths, right? Build it in. What other suggestions or ideas have come up with your clients when they're trying to become more present and trying to slow down and become more mindful, but really feeling like the challenge of just being caught up in life?
Yes, that's another great question. And I think, like you said, I mean, we're all human, and I don't feel like, I mean, I don't know, some may disagree, but I don't know if there's ever such a thing as perfecting mindfulness. I mean, when you say that you struggle with it and that's the hardest thing, I feel like, anyone and everyone can resonate that. But I just feel like it's that remembering to do it, like you said, like before you get in the shower. And it can be, like when you're in traffic, like something, as simple as taking a deep breath when you're in traffic, not only to help you with, that situation that you're in, but also just, kind of like checking yourself when you feel like you maybe have overscheduled yourself, if that makes sense. I don't know if it helps some people. I know they'll put like a reminder on their phone, like an alarm, to be like, okay, this is your alarm to do some mindfulness. And I don't do that only because sometimes that's not the best time for me to do mindfulness if the alarm goes off and I'm in the middle of something. And so, yeah, I think it's a great question. And I think it's really dependent on the person. So, like some people they're more morning people. So maybe for them, setting aside like, a minute, 5 minutes, whatever they think is doable, or in the middle of the day, a break in the, work day, or in the evening before they go to bed. And I think, it's part of that habit forming. So whatever is going to work best for each individual, I feel like it's, kind of more of a personal choice.
And also remembering that it is a muscle to be exercised, just like everything else. When we think about this is brain work, this is brain training, and then the effects of those brain training combined with breath training, right? Combined with body training to be able to be still for a moment truly has all of those scientific impacts on the body that you're talking about, like really allowing us to slow down. I find that can be helpful for clients as well, as like for those who really benefit from understanding the science and how it works in their body, is sometimes like, let's put on a monitor so that they can see their pulse, and let's have a conversation, and let's get really riled up about something. And then they're like, whoa, they're starting to see things go up. Or, maybe take a blood pressure read beforehand, bringing in our nursing tools. And then, okay, let's sit and breathe for a minute. Maybe I'll guide them through something, maybe I won't. And like literally being able for them to watch the numbers come down and see that biometric feedback is like, okay, there's something to this, right? Okay, there's now I'm starting to understand not just that it's a thing that could be effective, but that it's a tool that I now have in my tool belt that literally is effective. I've seen that proof. So I like that you touched on that side of things too, Laura.
This past spring, I completed Dr. Joe has an Inner Health Coalition course for healthcare providers, and a component of that was learning about heart math, which is doing a lot of research. And I'm planning to take, I have that shiny object syndrome. I want to take heart math courses now. But they do have tools that you can measure. And I, have heard directly actually from other nurse coaches that they have seen significant impact in their own, like you're talking about this biometric feedback, and that's really amazing to be able to assess like your heart coherence, heart and brain coherence. And one other thing I wanted to mention that I thought about earlier was, maybe you heard about this, they say like, if someone says the people who say they don't have 20 minutes to meditate need an hour to meditate, something along those lines. Like, if you can't block off 20 minutes, you're the one who needs the, more time. But for clients, like start small. If it's something new to them, just having that alarm or having that time in the morning, being present while you're eating your meals. That's huge for mindfulness, and, a huge aspect of it. And that has, profound impact on your digestive system and your whole body. And so that's another one that I talk about, clients being not watching TV while you're eating, or, having your phone and that kind of thing.
That's cool that you mentioned that, because since you have graduated from the course, we've actually added in an additional module around that, is like mindfulness and mealtime. And we've added in an additional, actually 2 mindfulness practices of like how to slow down and practice gratitude before the meal. Sometimes focusing on a feeling like gratitude can make mindfulness come a little bit more easily. Our minds are on the same path there. Yeah, awesome. Another question that is coming up for me is thinking about, so you live in a unique place in Puerto Rico. You've got your unique nurse coaching practice that in one side of things really revolves around incorporating mindfulness. You've got your Stress Less with Mindfulness community online. Can you give me a few examples of the type of clients that you serve and like the growth or the transformation that they have gone through? It's kind of like a couple of short case studies to kind of understand who you help and how it works for them.
Actually, the first client that comes to mind is someone that I worked with. She lives on the other side of Puerto Rico, on the west side of the island. I'm over on the north, and she was really struggling just in and out of doctor's appointments and having these debilitating symptoms that she couldn't get an answer to, and just felt like every time she would go to the doctor, her symptoms were getting dismissed, and she was just really frustrated. And so working with her, she's told me beforehand, like through email when we were kind of getting to know each other, like how she's very shy and, she wasn't so sure about this, but she felt like, that it could help her. And so working with her and really helping her to not only make changes like in her food plan and what she ate throughout the day, but also helping her to become her own advocate, which I think is so underrated in our healthcare system, because if you don't have an advocate or you're not an advocate for yourself, it's just so hard. I mean, I experienced it firsthand with all the symptoms prior to my Hashimoto's diagnosis. And I ended up seeing a functional medicine doctor. And so in working with her, she was able to advocate for herself in, getting certain lab work done and testing that we had talked in our coaching sessions about. And after the 3 months of working with her, she felt tremendously better and felt like she could speak up. And I think she had this hesitancy, being more shy. She was like afraid to ask. And so giving her that confidence and ability to be able to, stand up for herself and say, I want test done and I need more information. I really, enjoyed working with her and seeing the progress that she made. And I mean, helping her to grow like as a person as well as, improving her health and how she felt day in and day out.
That's a really cool example because it does demonstrate both of those sides of things, right? Like on the one hand, what we traditionally think of as the role of a health and wellness nurse coach, right? Helping people with these areas of their health, their wellness, their disease management, whatever comorbidities or medications, all of those things are ready in our brain. But so there's that. And then there's also this empowerment side, right? Learning to find your voice, find your confidence, become a self-advocate. And then through that, more confidence, more overall wellness. It's a reminder that wellness is so much more than just health, right? In the physical side of things, but really is that holistic picture that I think is unique to the approach that we nurse coaches get to take when we work with our clients.
Definitely. That holistic approach makes such a big difference because there's so much more than just our physical health, emotional, spiritual, mental aspect of it. And looking at a person as a whole is so different than looking at just one, organ, one system, whatever it may be. It's so important to take everything into consideration. And I could get on my soapbox about functional nursing as well.
But we healthcare providers love to silo everything. Every part of the body has its own specific specialty and needs to be viewed only as one entity, not interconnected to the whole being, right?
It's like we're walking around like we're a puzzle, waiting to be put together.
Yeah, for me too. It's been one of my favorite parts of the approach that we get to take is like seeing people as whole people, treating them as whole human beings physiologically from a systems perspective, right? Like all of our systems are interconnected. There's no one organ that functions completely in isolation, but also holistically, as you said, from that mind, body, spirit, emotions, environment, mindfulness, right? Bringing it all in. And then the other thing that came to mind is you said you have shiny object syndrome. That's right. Like you find out about this cool thing that Dispenza is doing and you want to go take that and get that certification. And then you learn about heart math and you want to go do that. What's so cool about nurse coaching for so many nurses is that it gets to be that like overarching umbrella. And then you get to continue to follow these passions and interests and take more courses and certifications if you want, if that's your thing. And there's like pretty much always a way to bridge it together, to tie things together under a nurse coaching practice and have that feel really cohesive when you bring it to your clients. Do you find that from your experience?
Oh, yes, 100%. I gave up shiny object syndrome for New Year's this year, and I've been pretty good at it. I had already signed up for some courses the end of last year, so I was like, okay, need a break. But yes, there's so much. I mean, I took the functional medicine for nurses course right after the nurse coach collective and when I graduated because I just had that personal experience with my Hashimoto's and I wanted to learn more, not just for myself, but also just going into this nurse coaching role because I didn't know at the time what my niche or specialty would be. And I remember at the beginning of the program I shared my Hashimoto's journey and someone said, oh, it sounds like you found your niche. And I was like, no, that was just my experience, not necessarily my niche. I'm passionate. I love to work with clients who are struggling. I may have Hashimoto's, but it's not something that I want to do all day every day. Mindfulness, on the other hand, that's something I could talk about and do all day, every day.
Cool. Well, that's actually really interesting because in a lot of these conversations, it does come out that as a nurse coach is developing their niche or finding the population they want to serve, often it does come from looking inward or looking back at your journey historically and what's the health journey that you've struggled with or the personal journey that you've struggled with. And then that can tend to be naturally the area where you then lean in to serve and support others. So I like that you're being honest about that and saying like, well, no, this is something I'm interested in. I enjoy it, but it's not going to be my defined niche and what I live and breathe and do every day. So then what is, well, this other thing that is what you live and breathe. It is what you're passionate about. And even that though, Laura, you said, I'm going to, have my practice with this pillar of mindfulness, but I still recognize it's not for everybody, right? Some people, that's not what they want. That's not what they're looking for. That's not what they're open to. And I think that flexibility is critical because it means you truly are being a nurse coach. You are meeting each client individually where they're at on their journey and respecting and honoring their process, bringing in all your tools and skills and knowledge, but allowing them to stay in the lead.
Yes, of course. I think it's so important. We don't want to force anything on anyone. And it's not like I'm going to, dish out mindfulness like it's a prescription, like medication. It's like I love it. I'm passionate about it. I've, had my own personal and professional, like I said, transformations with it. And I just want to share that with the world for whoever wants to listen and participate. And for those who don't, that's, more respect to them. It's not for them.
Love it. And power to you, Laura, because that is the type of passion that is going to keep you motivated and fulfilled inside of this field. That is what's going to keep you successful, right? Is following that compass that you have of this is the work that I love, that I want to share with people. And it's not going to be for everybody, but for the people that it's for, yes, those are my people.
Come on in.
Come on in. That's right. Beautiful. Well, Laura, I can't appreciate you enough for spending this time with me today. Are there any final words, thoughts, insights that you would like to leave for our listeners, especially fellow nurses who have, maybe they're at that point of learning about this, thinking about this, wondering if it's real, wondering if nurse coaching is too good to be true? Any words of wisdom that you want to leave on the table here?
I see you and I feel you, and it is indeed real. I can see how you may, question it and be skeptical, but it's definitely been an incredible journey for me. And I'm so grateful that I crossed paths with that nurse coach when I did. And I am just really excited that's actually, I guess, one other thing that, part of there is a little bit of a struggle because we aren't quite, a household name as nurse coaches. And so part of the excitement is I feel like, we're in a way pioneers. So we get to, it depends how you look at it. Look at it as a struggle or look at it as like, I try to look at it as like, it's so exciting. We get to share this now with the world. Like thinking about, in the 80s when nurse practitioners became, a role, and now we have nurse coaches. And so we get to, educate and share with everyone, this new role and opportunity and how we can help so many people. What I love most is like a preventative approach to helping these clients and whoever wants to listen in order to, avoid having to, nothing against, doctors or prescriptions or anything. There's a time and a place for that, but, avoid maybe not having a prescription when there is another option. There's an alternative. So that's all I guess I want to share. And yes, just I would say believe in yourself and, one day at a time, and the sky's the limit. And that's what's so beautiful about being, whether you want to be a nurse coach in a healthcare system or, have your own business, it's really incredible just to see that, you create what you want is essentially what it comes down to.
So come join us because we need more pioneers in leading this movement. And it's really true. And I think, gosh, we are so much closer to being household names as nurse coaches than we were a decade ago when Peter and I started this, and we had to search far and wide to find, one or two nurse coaches we could connect with. And we lived in a major metropolitan city, and now, interestingly, almost every nurse who comes to this program is here because they met another nurse coach. They talked to another nurse coach, right? Like real live out there in the flesh. We have nurse coaches in every single state, all across the country, Puerto Rico, right? So the reach is really, really starting to catch up with us. And we still have this gift of being on the forefront, of getting to be a part of shaping this movement. So Laura, I'm super, super honored to get to be a part of shaping this movement with you. One of the most important pieces of growing the movement, increasing the lobbying power that we have as nurse coaches. We haven't talked about this at all today, and we won't go down this rabbit hole, but it is through board certification. You are both board certified as a nurse coach, as a holistic nurse as well. And quick plug for you is that yet another awesome thing that you have created is a set of flashcards as a study resource for the nurse coach and the holistic nurse board exam. And I know you've also found a very creative way to incorporate mindfulness into that process. So study doesn't have to be wild and crazy and stressful, but instead gets to be something that we slow down and are intentional with. And wouldn't you believe that also improves our learning and our retention and all of those wonderful things. So I will be sure to include links to your website, links to your study resources inside of the show notes. And Laura, thanks so much for being here and joining me today.
Rather, I just have one last thing for those who are watching on the video. I still have this on, my Transform Healthcare from last year's conference. So for any of those nurses who may be listening or anyone, let's continue to transform healthcare. Thank you so much, Heather. I appreciate this opportunity.
Let's do it, Laura. Thanks.